CISA's secure by default posits that software applications come to us with tons of tools, tons of capabilities, but nothing's turned on. It's not on by default, and that means we're relying on the users to turn on these protective features. And I'm just betting that people don't always use those features. We're going to join someone to talk about that. Catch us in a minute.
The main thing is, you got to understand the architecture.
Give me the ball. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to the game. We're super excited to have you here with us. We got a really interesting show today. I'm pretty excited about it. We're going to be talking about RHEL, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, maybe some other Linuxy goodness, maybe rabbits, as far as I understand it, which should be pretty cool. But before we do all that, interesting news, Beyond EMEA is sold out, so I can't tell you to go there because if you didn't buy your ticket, it's too late. Sorry. But don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. Interact with us in the comments. Matt and I realize that XP is apparently a thing now in the chat, and we don't want to be number 1 and 2 on our own show. So toss some comments in there, interact with us. We'll bring them up if we see them. But let's not waste any more time. Let's jump right in. Matt, William.
Hey, welcome.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Yeah, gentlemen might be a stretch, but good afternoon all the same. Winter, why don't you do this? Do us a favor. Introduce yourself. Kind of tell us what you do for a living and why you're so passionate about Red Hat Enterprise Linux and security tools.
Well, I started learning Unix when I was 8 years old in the 90s, although I didn't know it at the time. And I had a neighbor who was a Unix administrator. Who knew? Anyway, I was a Solaris administrator in the 90s and early 2000s. Started using Linux professionally in RHEL 4, and I've been pretty much a dedicated RHEL administrator since RHEL 6. And then back in 2017, Red Hat called me and said, "Would you like to come work for us?" And I said, "Yes." So now it's been like, I've been with Red Hat now since July of 2017, and they seem to like having me around, and I seem to like them, so we're going to keep on going with it.
That's super
But
awesome.
all the time I've been working, all the time I've been working there, of course, security is one thing I have to deal with. I should say right away to our gallery out there, I am not a dedicated security guy, dedicated security specialist. I just have to deal with it a lot, and I've had to be in the trenches a lot. But I am a principal consultant. Basically, they send me all over the United States and Canada and to Europe a few times to build and or fix our client stuff. Like, our stuff doesn't work, or we just bought new stuff. Can you get it to work? I also have a clearance, so I'm often sent to undisclosed, disconnected systems where I'm surrounded by grim-faced men with guns while I do my work, but they seem to like having me around too, so what the heck.
That's fair. We might have to get into that conversation a whole nother day. Right. The winter's view of the skiff and that discussion. Listen, one of the things that sparked this for me is I saw you getting ready to do a talk. I believe it was at Wild West Hackers Fest. Was that from last year or 2 years ago?
Yes, I did a talk. I did it twice last year, actually, at GurCon and at Red Hat's internal conference, Red Hat 1, titled "We Don't Like That Part, So We Turned It Off." And it's all about these built-in free tools that we provide with Red Hat. There's no extra subscription or anything. They're baked into Red Hat, and people just turn them off because they don't want to deal with it, or they don't understand how they work. Go ahead and start the slides, Mr. Don. So we've talked about this already. I suppose I should add that you're going to see lots of rabbits throughout this, and maybe a few skulls or two. But my wife and I run a domestic rabbit rescue, Eastern Shore Rabbit Rescue in Rock Hall, Maryland. So if you ever have questions about either RHEL security or about rabbit care, I'm the guy to call. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So here I'm talking about in general various tools we provide that everyone just disables. You go to these blogs and tutorials and stuff, and you'll see right at the top, say it's SELinux, first disable SELinux, and I'm just, I stopped reading here. You see it with Firewalld, you see it with IP tables, you see it with
Oh yeah.
Fapolicyd. There are some tools I'll talk about here you don't see it with because they're not turned on by default, so people just ignore them, which isn't better necessarily. So, yeah, bottom line is these are provided to help you secure your systems, and people don't want to deal with it. And next slide, we run into this situation that we have a combination of users who or administrators. I mean, I'll give them credit in their defense. There's only so many hours in a day. They've got a whole lot to deal with already. They've turned on a system that years ago they've never even heard of SELinux, and they're wondering why are things not working, and they don't have the time to deal with SELinux right now. We're again talking way back in RHEL 4 and RHEL 5, and so they turn it off and never think about it again. Same thing with IP tables, same thing with Fapolicyd, which I'll talk about later. But why don't we go ahead and start talking about the first thing that everyone had to deal with, IP tables, now Firewalld. Way back in the earlier days, you might see people say you don't need to be running a local firewall on your operating system, that it slows your system down, it's unnecessary overhead, or you already have corporate firewalls protecting your systems. Why do you need this? And I say, well, that's like you've got your hard candy shell and now you only have this chewy caramel center. And why not run IP tables or Firewalld to have the layers of security? Security, it's all about layers, right? So,
Yep.
and you might not want, okay, everything's
The other thing I'll
protected.
add too is that when you're
Yes.
talking about firewalls, CIS 4.5 says implement and manage, right, a firewall on your workstations, and 4.6 and 4.4 says have a firewall on the actual host of your endpoint. So like if you're just curious as to why one might do it, there's already reasons to. There's safeguards for it. Okay, go William. Sorry about that, but yeah.
Yes, what he said. Um, Also, okay, you have a defended exterior, you have your interior. Who knows how big your environment is? You don't necessarily want systems from one network to be able to connect to systems on another network. You want to parcel things out, subnet things. We're talking about layers again. So for folks in the gallery out there, I'm sure most of you know what a firewall is doing. For the few out there, every system on the internet has an address, and that address can present any number of ports. And so say you connect to a system for a web server, it's connecting over port 80 or port 443. And so based on address and port, that's how you get to the application that the system is providing. And so you use firewalls to say, hey, these guys are allowed to this port, but these guys aren't. And it used to be, we had IP tables, Linux. Before that, it was, oh gosh, IP chains.
Yep.
My brain hurts now. But now we have Firewalld on RHEL systems, and it divides things into zones, services, and ports. And so say you've got bad network coming to your environment and you're like, we don't want any traffic for them. You direct them to the drop zone and it drops everything on the floor and you can walk away and never have to worry about it. If you want a system that we want to allow everything from it, you put it in your trusted zone, and then it's just allowed to get to everything. And so using zones and ports, you can really narrowly define what out there is allowed to get to your stuff. But you don't want the bad guys to get to your stuff. Yes, sir.
The other thing people forget about too is, let's say I land on this beautiful Red Hat Linux server and I'm on this machine, I've compromised it, and now I want to do more bad things. I want to look around me. I want to reach out to other machines. Don't forget about the benefit of blocking outbound traffic from something that's on the service.
Yeah.
If it doesn't need to communicate to it, it should be blocked, right? It's one of those thought processes of that goes to that micro-segmentation, assume breach, right? It goes into the principles of zero trust. So don't just think of a firewall as stopping something from coming in, but also think of it as blast radius reduction and stopping threat actors' intentions and next steps. Okay, I'll get off my pulpit.
Yeah, there was a really well done attack in that vein where the threat actors landed this was on Windows as an LNK file, so a desktop shortcut, and it referenced an icon. So SMB going out over the WAN was a very easy pass the hash attack. We should never allow that out, right? So firewalls are great in both directions.
I'm always delighted when I'm in a client that has actually configured outbound firewalling. Most people just say allow all out. I'm just, well, okay,
Yeah.
but you could harden things more. But we've probably talked firewalls to death now, and now we'll get to one of the biggest monsters folks have had to deal with. Go ahead, change that slide. SELinux. Oh boy, did this cause great rending of garments,
What
gnashing of
what is
teeth.
it? Like I don't even know what SELinux is. I'll tell on myself.
Okay, SELinux, it's a mandatory access control applied to the kernel, the Linux kernel, and it basically defines every port, every file, every process has a context, and that context must match what SELinux expects it to be. I'll use web servers as an example. You install a web server through Red Hat, you install it through our subscriptions, and it puts the files in Etsy, and it's out of the box is var dub HTML for content. That's exactly the way SELinux wants it to be. That is the proper context, we call it. If you decide to put web content into, say, var dub doom, and then try to run and say that's where my content is, SELinux is go, nope, content is not allowed to run from there. That is the wrong context. It's all, think of it as SELinux wants all the books to be in the bookshelf, all the spoons and knives to be in the drawers, and not vice versa. You don't put knives on the bookshelves. I'm being incredibly high level here because we don't have the
Sure.
time for me to dig in deep. Um, but essentially, everything has a context, and you have to match that context. You can't run SSH on a port other than 22, for example. You try to run SSH on port 98, why you'd want to do that anyway, but
So
SELinux would
would
go,
you,
no, we can't do that.
William, would you
Yes,
say
sir.
that people that are turning this off probably are, and maybe you won't say this out loud, I'll say it. They're turning it off probably because they're following not best practices and doing janky crap, and that's why SELinux causes them problems, and so they turn it off? Is that like a lot of the reason you think?
That may be a reason, but another reason I'd say is part of its history. It was introduced in RHEL 4, kind of not at RHEL 4.0, but in one of the point releases that I don't recall off the top of my head, my apologies. It was really part of RHEL 5, but both RHEL 4 and RHEL 5, it really was kind of duct taped and bolted onto the side.
Okay.
And I will admit, I'm a red hatter here. I will admit, in RHEL 4 and RHEL 5, SELinux could be really dodgy to deal with, and part of it is because we were learning it ourselves, so we had to look out for things. Us red hatters had to look out for it, and but by RHEL 6, it was baked in right from the creation like a pie, you know.
Sure.
And certainly by RHEL 7, 8, 9, SELinux really just works, but that history way back in RHEL 4 and 5, and then you had everybody saying you disable it, disable it, disable it, and it's just kind of haunted us since then. Even though
Sure.
now SELinux just works. Um, sure, 90% of the folks out there just need to have it enabled and never even need to think about it. Another 5% might need to create their own context policies, and then another minuscule percent might have to use SELinux classification levels where you can deal with context in different classifications like security levels. I have never
Sure.
personally been in an environment that dealt with that. I wish I would. I want to play with it, but hey, what can you do? Um, so folks out there who disable SELinux, put it into permissive mode instead, because that way things will still be allowed, but then you can check the logs, the audit logs, to see, okay, what is SELinux actually denying under the hood, and fix it. It's easy to do. If you disable it and then decide to re-enable it, you're going to break your system. You're going to restart your system. You go from disabled to enabled, enforcing, I should say. Your system is going to go, what? No, and die on you, and you get kernel panics. And so nobody has time for that, right? So put it
Yeah,
into
no.
permissive mode so then you can debug things and fix things properly. But yeah, really a combination of it had a rocky start, and that kind of still people still
Plagues
remember
people.
that, combined with there are folks who just they don't have that kind of time, and they're like, I don't want to deal with SELinux, and we do what we can.
So
But
the
wait,
first one is
yes, sir.
Firewall D, right? The first one's
Yes.
Firewall D, and before that IP tables, people are turning off the firewall, or it's not enabled by default, right? Is the statement, is that correct? Or is Firewall enabled by default on RHEL?
It is enabled by default.
And then secondary is SELinux. They're turning off another enabled by default component as well, or is SELinux something you have to turn on as well?
It's enabled by default.
Okay, I just wanted to point out that this is 2 of 2 where someone had to take an active step to kill themselves. Okay, continue.
Yes,
Let's
indeed. Next slide. This is the new wonderful kid on the block, Fapolicyd. Now, this is a combo breaker here. This is not enabled by default unless you apply a STIG at install time. If you're just installing vanilla RHEL, this is not enabled by default. So what Fapolicyd does, it's a combination of, is this file trusted by the operating system, and is this user trusted to run that file, that executable? So we may have the GCC C compiler installed, right? Does the system trust it? If you install it from Red Hat, it's going to by default. If you just get it from somewhere else, it's not going to trust it by default. But then we can have the file trusted, but Matt Lee, we don't want him running GCC on this system, so you are not trusted to run that file. I think this is a great utility because you can really refine what exactly is allowed to run on your system and by who.
Sure.
The problem we ran into with this one is it started and it was first introduced in RHEL 8, and it was just kind of put into RHEL 8 and not really talked about. And again, if you're doing a vanilla install, it's not enabled by default, but if folks are applying security policies at install time, Fapolicyd gets enabled, and then things would not be running or not working. They go, what? Why is this not working? And you'd have to ask them, is Fapolicyd running? And they'd be all, is what running? Like they've never even heard of it. That was mostly the case with RHEL 8. Now with RHEL 9 and 10, people are far more familiar with it. This can be tricky to get set up just right. Although it helps if you install software right from Red Hat, it's trusted by default. Just making sure you get the users right, like who is allowed to run things and who isn't allowed to run things. Getting that nailed down just right takes time and effort. But once you've got it done, this is a super great way to harden the system. I'm a big fan of Fapolicyd. What can I say?
Well, and if you think about it, like it's blending the earlier work in SELinux from, is this contextually correct? Is it in the right place? Is it on the right port? Is it doing the right things? But now you're doing into, do I trust that file in its origin source? And do I allow Matt to run that? Or can Matt run that in this context? And so those two go hand in hand, I would imagine, between SELinux and Fapolicyd in that regard.
Yes, they do. They work great together. Also, SELinux doesn't care who you are. Fapolicyd really cares who you are.
Sure.
So yes, they work great side by side. But
So
wait,
you're now
there's more.
And think about this though. So I love these little recaps. So bear with me. I apologize.
Sure.
But now what
No
you're taking
problem.
is, I've landed on this machine. I have no firewall that blocks me from downloading my tools. I have no firewall that blocks me from egressing and lateralizing. So I'm already here. Now I don't have SELinux, so I can run my own, bring your own vulnerable version potentially and execute it somewhere, or do other things that might be contextually wrong with the tool sets via like living off the land tools and other type of things, right? Where I've landed now and I need to use things. And then without Policyd, now I would make it where if I compromise a user and I'm accessing that system illicitly, if that user didn't have access to do those things because of GIA policies, PIM-PAM policies that exist in Fapolicyd in that way, then I now can't lateralize as well. I hope y'all at home are following along with these things of the journey of the attacker and what each of these components is going to do for that attacker, right? And where we're at. Okay, thank you, William.
You know where else my head went on that though? As someone who used to do way too much help desk, I can keep you from like running Spotify, or iTunes, like all these dumb apps that I got help desk calls about, like that application control layer. Preventing executables you don't trust, but also preventing executables you simply don't want users bogging your machines down with.
Sure. But I need to run my crypto miner, Dom. That sweet Linux crypto miner. Continue, William.
But go ahead to the next slide. Still, one thing about Fapolicyd, and this makes my head hurt. In our own documentation, sorry, Red Hat, we tell you to have put it, if not disable, put Fapolicyd into permissive mode for one of our own products. And it's just,
Oh,
oh man. Now,
oh,
to give the devs credit, there's a lot of moving parts under the hood of Ansible Automation Platform, and I'm also a huge fan and certified in Ansible Automation Platform. But there's so much going on under the hood that trying to tune Fapolicyd just right, that's a massive undertaking.
sure,
It may or may not be fixed in 2.6. I actually honestly have no idea. I know they're working on it. So, but still, it's just it's hard, guys. It can be really hard to get things just right. And we're
sure.
doing our best. But go ahead to the next slide.
So we actually have a question in the chat from Jeff that I wanted to bring up. It says, how well does Fapolicyd work with IDM? And I'm assuming they mean identity management.
Oh, Fapolicyd. Oh, hey, Jeff. I know Jeff, actually. It plays very well with IDM. It's kind of IDM. There's no issues with it. As long as you pay attention to getting it, the right users configured. When it comes to trusted files for IDM, that you don't need to worry about that. That'll just work. If you're installing it through Red Hat, it'll just work. You just have to play with who's allowed to do what. That's all. Oh, I should also say, out of the box, everybody's allowed to do anything.
Okay.
With FA,
In the
the
initial
problem is
rolling it out, right? Turning it on, it's available. Everybody can do everything initially without policies.
the problem with rolling it out is the trusted. Does the system trust the file itself? And when if you don't know Fapolicyd even exists, and you've installed stuff from all over the place, not just Red Hat, that's where you come in. That's where you get your trouble, because Fapolicyd, I don't know where you got this from, and I'm not running that. So
Fair.
anyway, now we have a product called AIDE. This is also not enabled by default. You have to intentionally turn this on. You guys are probably familiar with the concept of tripwiring, perhaps.
Okay. Yeah,
Where you
canary files or things that you're setting up for people to trigger in that way for catching threat actors in that way. Is that what you mean?
this is more of a you create checksums of all your files, and if that is modified in any way, the AIDE triggers a warning that say, "Hey, somebody just changed this file." It could be the access. It was accessed. It was modified. Its ownerships were changed. Its executable bits were changed, and so you can say, "Hey, I've got this whole list of files. I want to know, has anyone done anything to them?" And the moment, like if some bad guy gets in and edits your DNS named.conf file, the moment they save that change, AIDE's going to go, whoop, nope, somebody changed that file. You better look at that.
Is
Now,
AIDE initially set up to look at sensitive files like etc host or those types of things by default, or do you actually have to tune AIDE, or is it doing all files on the system? I'm just curious what level of noisiness this
you
creates.
actually don't want to do it to all files on the system.
I
Like
wouldn't think
running
so.
AIDE on temp files would just be a pain in the. You really don't want to run it on var. You don't want to run it on temp, but you definitely want to run it on your config files in etc. You want to apply it to everything in bin or sbin or user local bin. All your application executables. You want to run it on those.
All the things I might want to modify a binary to inject something in it or change something, right? Is the purpose of this, yeah?
Exactly. Now, one thing you have to remember: if you're the good guy, Matt, it's your system. You have AIDE running. You've made that checksum of all these files, and it's looking for modifications. You deliberately have to make a legit modification. You have to remember to tell AIDE you did that. You generate a new database because you just made that change. So there you go. So that's something you have to keep on.
Like after you make the change or prior to making the change? Probably after, and you re-fingerprint. Yeah.
You do it after. Yeah, exactly. You re-fingerprint everything.
That's really cool.
Now, one thing, both Fapolicyd and AIDE can do file checksums. That takes quite a hit on your system. You don't want to do it with both AIDE and Fapolicyd. Pick one.
Sure. Yeah.
There's no point in having both tools doing checksum checks.
And I would imagine with AIDE, you have a very specific function you're doing the checksums for and are looking for deltas. I would probably do it in AIDE, not in Fapolicyd, I'm guessing.
If I given the choice and I was running both, I would do it in AIDE instead. Yeah.
Fair. By the way, I don't see many $1,000 bills, but I think I could snag that one. Like it feels like it's a sucker's bet, but I think I might get that thing out there with that corner up there. Anyways, I digress. Continue.
All right. So we can go to the last thing on our menu today. Good old-fashioned FIPS mode. FIPS mode. It's
Yay.
a combination of cryptographic protocols, and if you have hardware that's certified to be tamper-proof and with tamper sensors,
Like an
FIPS
HSM
will,
or something. Yeah.
FIPS will detect tampering. Here's the problem with FIPS. It's either on or off. You don't really configure. You can very loosely apply different algorithms. You can say, hey, FIPS, use this set of algorithms instead of those,
Sure.
but that's a very simple change. But you really think of FIPS as being on or off. You've got to plan, do you want it to be on or off right before you touch anything? You've got a blank metal, no operating system. Do you want FIPS mode on or off? And you got to make that decision right now because you really can't go back.
Because it affects the whole kernel, I would wager.
Yes.
From install out.
And you can install it, you can enable it after an operating system is installed, but you're still not 100% FIPS compliant then. You can only be 100% compliant if you have it enabled right from install time. Let's use IDM for an example. IDM, you either have it on FIPS mode on or off when you install IDM. Once IDM is running, you cannot change your FIPS, is it on or off? If you do, you're in for a bad time, and it's actually difficult to reverse too. Unless you have good backups.
I mean, typically if you're doing FIPS, you're doing it because you have a reason. You have a contract that is requiring it, I would wager.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, it's typically where I've seen people choose to go down that path. Yeah.
Or if you're applying security policies and STIGs, almost all of them will turn FIPS on by default. So if FIPS mode is not on a vanilla install, is not on a vanilla install. It will only be automatically on if you tell it to be on or if you're applying a security policy at install time. And why are we doing all of this? Why do we even care about all of this? Next slide. We're trying to prevent this because no one wants that. You want to keep your cookies.
I do want to keep my cookies. I want to eat my cookies.
So what's if I can too long didn't read all of this. Sure. All of these tools, if you have them all working together, you've configured them that's right. I mean, first, Firewalld will presumably keep a lot out to begin with. And once they get in, SELinux will trip them up because they'll try to run things in the wrong context, and SELinux will go, nope. Mm-hmm. Get beyond SELinux, Fapolicyd will say, hey, you're trying to run Perl out of the temp directory. What the heck do you think you're doing, buddy? And AIDE will make sure an AIDE kicks in, and if anything is modified on your system by anybody, the bad guy gets in and makes a change to a file that you know immediately or within minutes. And of course, FIPS mode enforces harder cryptographic algorithms and can notify you of hardware tampering if you have the right hardware for it. So that's pretty useful. So put these all together and it's like black magic. Now,
but if I continue,
yes.
Sorry.
No, I'll just, even with all of this, there's no such thing as perfect security. There's always a way, especially on the inside, if someone's attacking from the inside. But put all these together, and you're going to, you should feel pretty reasonably confident you've done the best you can do. So go ahead. What were your questions, sir?
No, I just was going to say, I mean, I think the interesting part for me is that people have the tools and don't use them out of convenience in a lot of cases. And people that make operating systems don't want to lose the business by turning things on that might frustrate people, right? And so you have this kind of unfortunate balance that leaves those in the front lines having to make these decisions themselves. And anyways, yeah, sorry, just a thought that came to mind.
No, it's a worthy thought. Now, I'm not seeing I don't have the chat feed up for myself, but are there any other questions?
We've got Jesse saying, hi, William, from the Burris guys, Jesse Bontrager. I
Hello,
envision these
Jesse.
tools as being a various pratfalls from Home Alone. Oh, that's awesome. And I haven't heard pratfall in a long time. So like
All
I'm
right.
super stoked to get the term pratfall in my lexicon today. So that's awesome. Yeah, agreed. And I think that's the point. Deception and methods of trying to find and reduce the threat for me are probably where the biggest differences are made in an incident, right? Like bad guy's gonna bad guy. It's how hard do I make it for them? How hard do I make it for them to continue to escalate? And how do I limit my damage, right? And go on with business. And yeah, anyways, it's just interesting. I'm much more of a Windows guy than a Linux guy. And so it's interesting to see the exact same parallels play out in Linux that we see every day in the Windows side as well. Anything else to add, William, that you want
You
to
know,
add to this?
I gotta say,
Sort of.
on the Windows Linux conversation, it's a lot harder to have FIM or file integrity monitoring in Windows, and it's a lot harder. Windows 11 fixed a lot of the kernel issues, but it's a lot harder to do some of the secure configuration in Windows, and to that end, platforms like RHEL and even the more open platforms in Linux have come a long way, right? And they make it easier in a lot of ways.
Now, I don't even know what tools Windows has available to do these similar things, but I think the idea behind these would still apply.
Sure.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Ultimately, this
100%.
whole talk has been almost a philosophical talk about everything. I could have gotten into the weeds. And hey,
Sure.
if anybody here ever wants to really get into eye-watering weeds about any of this, feel free to drop me a line, and
All right, for
you'll want me
sure.
to shut up.
I
So
doubt it.
that's
I
it.
doubt it. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you being here, and thanks for fighting the good fight and kind of ancillarily being involved in security, to your point, in the role that you play. And yeah, thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure to mine. Thank you.
Thanks so much, William. This was great. Let's kick it over to the play of the day.
Okay, the play of the day, where I get 60 seconds to talk about what we just talked about and for y'all to hear it. For me, it's one of these things where we talk about secure by default and secure by design. And it's very clear that lots and lots of work is going into the secure by design. If you think of the ways the tools are added, and they're added by default, and they're on, and they're escalating, they're adding multiple layers, and they're doing all these things, and yet we as practitioners don't use it for a lot of reasons. One would be the inconvenience and the challenge of it. The other would be the fear of just stigma from years past when it was first introduced, and to that second point on SELinux. But the point is that we have all these things and ways to help protect ourselves, and yet we think only about all those tools people are selling separately for us, and this stops all threats. Maybe start by actually configuring yourself to be secure, to actually care about the outcome of what you're producing when you're designing the systems that you install. That's it. Join us next week. I think we're good. I'm not going to end on 4 seconds. I'm out. I'm done. I can only just...
Game over.
No, you got to stretch out play of the game for the entire. That's just how it works. Like, it's got to be a minute, even if you're just rambling. Hey, I wanted to cover a couple of things, and maybe William can hop in the comments. But I asked him one question in the green room. Sam, you asked, are there DevOps tools to replicate this in a build pipeline? And we only had time for yes. So we didn't get into detail, but yes, you can replicate that in a build pipeline. And a question about running Fapolicyd and AIDE together, and how you reconcile those when a disastig requires both. Stigs are fun. I don't like stigs. I know, William, you've got to deal with stigs, but no, thank you. Anyways, that is our show for today. Thank you so much for joining us. And we will see you next time, same place. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. Thank you for participating in comments this week. See you next time.